What could an 11-year-old child possibly draw that would stop one of America's most beloved judges mid-sentence, cause a packed courtroom to fall into complete silence, and ultimately change the course of several lives forever? Before I tell you what happened in that Providence courtroom on a Tuesday morning in October, I need you to understand that this isn't just another feel-good story. If you've ever doubted the power of innocence to pierce through the hardest of circumstances, drop a comment below telling me about a time a child changed your perspective on something important. Because what Judge Frank Caprio saw in that crayon drawing would haunt him, inspire him, and remind every single person in that room why justice must always be tempered with mercy. This is a story about Sofia Santos, a single mother of 3 who drove into Judge Caprio's courtroom that morning, expecting the worst. Hit that subscribe button if you believe that sometimes the system gets it right, because what you're about to witness is exactly why Judge Caprio has become a symbol of compassionate justice across the world. Maria had been cited for running a red light at the intersection of Broadway and Empire Street at exactly 7:47 a.m. on September 18, 2019. The fine was $185, but for Maria, that might as well have been $18,000. She cleaned offices at night, worked as a lunch aide at her children's elementary school during the day, and every single dollar was already allocated before it even touched her bank account. Like this video if you've ever had to choose between paying a bill and feeding your family, because Maria knew that choice intimately. But here's what made this case different. Here's why this moment would explode across social media and reach over 40 million views in less than a week. Maria didn't come to court alone that morning. She brought her 11-year-old daughter Sofia, who had begged to come along, promising she wouldn't make a sound. Sofia had been working on something in secret for 3 days, hunched over the small desk in the bedroom she shared with her 2 younger brothers, using the nearly worn-down box of crayons she'd gotten from the school supply drive last September. The courtroom was packed that morning, as it usually was when Judge Caprio presided. People from the neighborhood, students studying law, local journalists, and of course, the steady stream of defendants, hoping for the judge's legendary compassion. Maria sat in the 3rd row, her worn leather purse clutched in her lap, Sofia beside her in a navy blue dress that was slightly too small now, her white sneakers cleaned to near perfection, but showing signs of being glued back together at the sole. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that dignity doesn't require wealth, because the way Sofia sat beside her mother that morning, back straight, hands folded, you could see she'd been raised with something money couldn't buy. Judge Frank Caprio, then 79 years old, took the bench at 9 a.m. sharp. The man had become an internet sensation for his approach to municipal court, treating each defendant with respect, asking about their circumstances, and often reducing or dismissing fines for people genuinely struggling. But even for someone who'd seen thousands of cases, who'd heard every excuse and every heartbreaking story, what was about to happen would stand out as the single most profound moment of his 4-decade career on the bench. When Maria's name was called, she stood slowly, smoothing down her Target clearance rack blouse, the price tag deliberately left on so she could return it after the hearing. Sofia stood with her, and Judge Caprio immediately noticed the child. "Is this young lady with you?" he asked, his voice carrying that familiar warmth that had made him beloved across the internet. His reading glasses sat perched on his nose, the case file open before him. Maria nodded, her voice barely above a whisper when she confirmed that yes, this was her daughter Sofia. Drop a comment if you think children should see how the justice system works, because what Sofia was about to contribute to these proceedings would teach every adult in that room something they'd carry for the rest of their lives. Judge Caprio smiled at Sofia, that genuine smile that reached his eyes, the one that had comforted countless anxious defendants over the years. "It's good that you're here," he told her. "It's important to understand how these things work." Then he turned his attention to the case. The facts were straightforward, captured on the traffic camera at Broadway and Empire. Maria's 2004 Honda Civic, the one with the dented passenger door and the duct-taped side mirror, had clearly proceeded through the intersection after the light had turned red. Not by a fraction of a second, but by a full 2.3 seconds, according to the timestamp. It was a clear violation, no ambiguity, The officer who'd reviewed the footage, Sergeant Michael Torres, had issued the citation according to standard procedure. In court that morning, the evidence was undeniable. Judge Caprio looked at the photos, looked at the timestamp, then looked at Maria. "Ms. Santos," he began, his tone neutral but not unkind, "can you tell me what happened that morning? Why did you run this light?" Quote, this is where Maria's voice broke. If you've ever worked 3 jobs and still couldn't make ends meet, hit that like button, because you'll understand what came next. Maria explained that she'd been up since 3:30 that morning. Her youngest, Mateo, who was 6, had been running a fever of 102 degrees. She'd given him children's Tylenol, the store-brand version because it was $1 cheaper, and waited for it to bring his temperature down. By 6:45 a.m., he was sleeping peacefully, and she'd made the decision to still take her older children to school and make it to her 8 a.m. shift at the elementary school. If she missed that shift, she didn't get paid. There was no sick leave for part-time workers. She'd been exhausted, worried about Mateo, calculating in her mind whether she had enough in her account to take him to the clinic if the fever came back. "I saw the light yellow," Maria said, tears now streaming down her face despite her best efforts to maintain composure. "I thought I could make it. I know that's not an excuse. I know I broke the law. But I was just trying to get to work, trying to keep us afloat." The courtroom had gone quiet. Even the court officer, Jimmy Martinez, who'd heard thousands of these explanations, found himself looking down. Share this with someone who understands that poverty isn't a moral failure, because what was becoming clear to everyone was that Maria Santos wasn't reckless or negligent. She was drowning, doing everything right, and still barely keeping her head above water. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair, processing this information. He'd waived fines before, he'd dismissed cases. But something about Maria's case was settling heavily on him that morning. Before he could speak, something unexpected happened. Sofia, who had been sitting quietly in the small chair beside her mother at the defendant's table, stood up. She was holding something, a piece of paper folded carefully into thirds. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice was clear when she spoke. "Excuse me, Mr. Judge?" The honorific was wrong, but the respect behind it was absolute. Judge Caprio paused, his hand raised to signal it was all right. "Yes, sweetheart?" Sofia took 3 steps forward, holding out the folded paper. "I made something for you. My mom doesn't know about it. I just wanted you to see it before you decide. Drop a comment telling me if you believe children see truth more clearly than adults sometimes, because what Sofia handed to Judge Caprio in that moment would become the most powerful piece of evidence presented in his courtroom that year. The judge took the paper carefully, nodding his thanks to Sofia, who quickly returned to her seat beside her mother. Maria looked confused, having no idea what her daughter had just handed over. Judge Caprio unfolded the paper slowly, and everyone in the courtroom watched his face. Those who were there that morning would later describe the change in his expression as immediate and profound. His eyes, which had been warm but judicial, softened completely. His mouth, which had been set in that neutral line judge's master, trembled slightly. He stared at that drawing for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 15 seconds. The courtroom had fallen into the kind of silence that feels physical, that presses against your eardrums. Finally, Judge Caprio looked up at Sofia. "Did you draw this?" he asked, his voice noticeably different now, gentler somehow, weighted with emotion. Sofia nodded. "Yes, sir. I've been working on it for 3 days. I wanted it to be perfect." The judge looked back down at the paper, then at Maria, then at the gallery of people watching. "Would you mind," he said to Sofia, "if I shared this with everyone here? I think they should see what you've created." Sofia's eyes went wide, but she nodded permission. If you want to know what that drawing showed, hit that subscribe button, because I'm about to describe an image that would go viral, be shared millions of times, and eventually be featured in news segments from CNN to the BBC. Judge Caprio stood, which he rarely did during proceedings, and held up the drawing so the courtroom could see. It was rendered in crayon on standard 8, 5 by 11 printer paper, the kind you buy in bulk at Walmart. But what Sofia had created with those cheap crayons transcended the medium. The drawing showed a courtroom, clearly recognizable with its wooden benches and raised judge's bench. Behind the judge's bench, Sofia had drawn an American flag in careful detail, getting the number of stripes right, though the stars were represented by small blue dots. At the judge's bench sat a figure in black robes, and Sofia had somehow captured Judge Caprio's distinctive features, his glasses, the kind slope of his posture. Below, at the defendant's table, was a woman, clearly meant to be Maria, and beside her, a small girl, obviously Sofia herself. But it was what Sofia had drawn around these figures that made grown men in that courtroom wipe their eyes. It was what made the court reporter, Patricia Williams, who'd been transcribing municipal court proceedings for 17 years, pause her typing. Share this video if you believe art can communicate what words cannot, because Sofia had drawn something that spoke to the fundamental tension of her young life. Surrounding the figures in the courtroom, Sofia had drawn what she labeled in careful printed letters as, quote, the worries. These weren't abstract concepts. These were specific, heartbreaking, completely concrete worries rendered by a child who lived with them every single day. There was a drawing of a refrigerator with its door open, showing just 3 items inside: a gallon of milk, a package of hot dogs, and what appeared to be a jar of jelly. Beside that, Sofia had drawn a piggy bank, cracked open and completely empty. She'd drawn a small figure, labeled Mateo in her careful handwriting, lying in bed with wavy lines coming off him to indicate fever. She'd drawn a car, clearly the family's Honda, with a gauge showing empty and a dollar sign with an X through it. She'd drawn an apartment building with a notice on the door, the words, too small to read but the red color making its meaning clear. But here's what stopped Judge Caprio's heart. Here's what made this drawing transcend from touching to absolutely profound. In the center of all these worries, in the center of all this fear and struggle, Sofia had drawn her mother. And her mother wasn't collapsing under the weight. Her mother was standing, arms outstretched, positioned between all these threatening elements and the 3 children Sofia had drawn behind her, protected. Above this central image, Sofia had written in her neatest handwriting, in letters that had clearly been erased and rewritten several times to get them perfect. My mom is a hero. She never stops fighting for us. Even when she's scared, she protects us. Please be kind to heroes. If you're not crying yet, I don't know what to tell you, because Judge Caprio was. Tears were running down the face of a man who'd maintained judicial composure through decades of heart-wrenching cases. He removed his glasses and wiped his eyes with his thumb and forefinger, not bothering to hide his emotion. The gallery was silent, except for the sound of sniffling, tissues being pulled from purses, quiet sobs that people were trying and failing to suppress. Maria had her hand over her mouth, seeing her daughter's drawing for the first time, understanding that Sofia had been observing everything, processing everything, carrying worries that no 11-year-old should have to carry. Like this video if you think we don't give children enough credit for their awareness and empathy, because Sofia Santos proved that morning that she understood her family's struggle with a clarity that was almost unbearable. Judge Caprio carefully placed the drawing on his bench, treating it with the reverence of precious evidence. He took a moment to compose himself, clearing his throat twice before he could speak. When he did, his voice carried to every corner of that courtroom. Sofia, he began, this is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen, and I want you to know something. Your mother is absolutely a hero. You're exactly right about that. He paused, looking directly at Maria now, who was crying silently, tears streaming down her face unchecked. Miss Santos, Judge Caprio continued, I've been doing this job for a very long time. I've seen thousands of cases, heard thousands of explanations. Some people come into this courtroom looking for loopholes, trying to game the system, showing no remorse for their actions. You are not one of those people. Drop a comment if you believe judges should consider the whole person, not just the violation, because what Judge Caprio said next would become one of the most watched clips in internet history. What I see before me is a woman who is working herself to exhaustion to provide for her children. I see someone who made a mistake, yes, but made it in the context of a life where every single day is a struggle, where there's no margin for error, no safety net, no room to breathe. Quote, he picked up Sofia's drawing again, holding it so the courtroom cameras, which were always rolling in his courtroom for his television show Caught in Providence, could capture it clearly. This drawing shows me something that the traffic camera couldn't capture. It shows me context. It shows me a family that's facing challenges that would break many people, but instead of breaking, you're persevering. Your daughter sees that. She's learning from you what real courage looks like. The emotion in the courtroom was palpable now. The woman in the front row, there for her own parking ticket, was crying openly. The law student from Brown University who'd come to observe proceedings was recording notes with shaking hands. The bailiff, who'd maintained a professional distance for his entire career, was blinking rapidly and staring at the ceiling. But Judge Caprio wasn't finished. "Sofia," he said, addressing the 11-year-old directly, "I want to tell you something important. You took the time to create this drawing. You saw your mother's struggle, and instead of just feeling bad about it, you did something. You used your creativity, your voice, to advocate for her. That's remarkable. That's the kind of person who's going to do important things in life. Share this if you believe that teaching children to advocate for justice is one of the most important things we can do. Because Sofia was receiving a lesson that morning that would shape the rest of her life. She was learning that the system, when it worked correctly, could see people as humans, not just case numbers. She was learning that compassion had a place in justice, that mercy wasn't weakness but wisdom." Judge Caprio looked down at his paperwork, at the citation that called for a $185 fine plus court costs. Everyone in the courtroom knew what was coming, but the anticipation was electric. "Miss Santos," he said formally, "I am dismissing this citation entirely. No fine, no court costs, no points on your license. The violation is erased from your record, as if it never happened." The courtroom erupted. Applause broke out, which never happened in court, but Judge Caprio didn't stop it. He let it continue for several seconds before raising his hand for quiet, but he still wasn't finished. If you think this is where the story ends, you don't know Judge Caprio. Hit that subscribe button, because what happened next showed why this man had become a symbol of how justice should work. "Furthermore," Judge Caprio continued, and the courtroom went silent again, "I'm going to do something I don't typically do." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out his personal checkbook. This was his own money, not court funds, not city money, but his personal resources. "Sofia," he said, "your drawing is a work of art, and in my family, we were taught that art has value, that it should be compensated. I would like to purchase your drawing from you. Would you sell it to me for $500? The courtroom gasped collectively. Sofia's eyes went wide with shock. Maria stood up involuntarily, shaking her head. "Your Honor, we can't accept—" "That's too much, we couldn't possibly." But Judge Caprio held up his hand gently. "Miss Santos, I'm not offering you charity. I'm purchasing artwork. This drawing is worth far more than $500 to me, but that's what I can comfortably offer today. Sofia put work into this. She deserves to be compensated for that work." He looked at Sofia again. "Sweetheart, is it okay if I keep your drawing? I want to frame it and put it in my chamber so I can see it every day. It will remind me why I do this job. It will remind me to always look beyond the violation to see the human being in front of me. Drop a comment telling me if you think this judge understood exactly what that money would mean to that family, because this wasn't about buying art. This was about dignity. This was about allowing Maria to accept help without feeling like she was accepting charity. This was about showing Sofia that her voice, her creativity, her advocacy for her mother had tangible value." Sofia looked at her mother, who was now sobbing, hand still over her mouth. Maria nodded through her tears. Sofia turned back to the judge and said, "Yes, sir. You can keep it. Thank you." Judge Caprio wrote the check right there, standing at his bench, tore it carefully from his checkbook, and walked down from the bench to hand it to Sofia personally. This was unprecedented. Judges don't leave the bench during proceedings. But Frank Caprio had long ago decided that some moments called for breaking protocol in service of humanity. He handed Sofia the check, then did something else that wasn't in any judicial handbook. He hugged her. A brief, fatherly hug that communicated more than any words could. "You're a special young lady," he told her quietly, though the courtroom microphones picked it up. "Don't ever stop using your voice to fight for what's right." Like this video if you believe the world needs more leaders who understand that power should be used to lift people up, not just to enforce rules. When Judge Caprio returned to the bench, Maria approached it hesitantly. "Your Honor," she began, her voice thick with emotion, "I don't know how to thank you. You didn't just help me today. You showed my daughter something I've been trying to teach her whole life, that there are good people in the world, that the system isn't always against people like us, that kindness exists even in places you don't expect it." Judge Caprio nodded, visibly moved. "Miss Santos, you're doing an extraordinary job raising your children. Sofia's drawing didn't just show me your struggles. It showed me that despite those struggles, you're raising children who are empathetic, creative, and brave. That's not easy to do when you're fighting just to survive. You should be very proud." What happened next, however, showed that the story was far from over. A man stood up in the gallery. His name was David Morrison, a local small business owner who'd come to court that morning for a parking dispute. He was wearing a Navy suit and had been watching the entire proceeding with visible emotion. "Your Honor," he said, "may I speak?" Judge Caprio, in a generous mood and clearly touched by the morning's events, nodded permission. This was highly irregular, but then again, everything about this morning had been unusual. Share this video if you believe that witnessing justice and compassion can inspire us to act, because David Morrison had been inspired. "I own Morrison's Auto Repair on Westminster Street," David said, his voice carrying clearly. "I couldn't help but notice in Sofia's drawing that the family car had an empty gas gauge. Miss Santos, I'd like to offer you free maintenance on your vehicle for a year, oil changes, brake inspections, basic repairs. And I'd like to fill your gas tank today before you leave. If you can drive to my shop after we're done here, my team will take care of it." Maria stood there, stunned, unable to process what was happening. But David wasn't the only one moved to action. A woman in her 60s, Margaret Chen, who'd been waiting for her case to be called, stood up next. "I manage the Cranston Street Community Center," she said. "Ms. Santos, we offer free after-school programs for children, including homework help, art classes, and sports. I'd like to enroll all 3 of your children at no cost. And we provide snacks." Drop a comment if you've ever witnessed how one act of kindness can create a ripple effect, because the courtroom was experiencing exactly that. A third person stood up, a younger man in his 30s wearing business casual attire. "My name is James Parker. I'm the principal at Bridgeton Elementary." "Miss Santos, I don't know if that's where your children attend, but I want you to know that every school in our district has resources for families experiencing financial hardship. There's no shame in accessing them. Please reach out to your children's school about food assistance, school supplies, and other support services. These programs exist because families need them." The emotion in that courtroom had transformed from sadness to something else entirely. It had become a kind of collective determination, a community deciding in real time that they wouldn't just witness this family's struggle, they would act to help alleviate it. Judge Caprio was wiping his eyes again, not even trying to maintain judicial composure anymore. "This," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "this is what community means. This is what we're supposed to do for each other." But the ripples weren't done spreading. Before Maria could respond to any of these offers, another voice came from the back of the courtroom. "Excuse me, Your Honor." Everyone turned to see a woman in her 40s approaching. She was wearing professional attire, a gray pantsuit, and carrying a leather portfolio. "My name is Rebecca Thornton. I'm a family law attorney here in Providence. Ms. Santos, I'd like to offer my services pro bono to help you access any benefits or assistance programs you might be eligible for but aren't currently receiving. Many families don't realize what they qualify for. I'd like to do a complete review of your situation and help you maximize your resources. Quote, like this video if you think lawyers who donate their expertise to help struggling families deserve recognition because Rebecca Thornton was offering something invaluable. Legal knowledge can be the difference between accessing crucial resources and drowning in bureaucracy. Maria was crying so hard now she could barely stand. Sofia had her arms wrapped around her mother's waist, her face pressed against her mother's side. The 11-year-old girl who'd been so composed when handing over her drawing was crying too, but these were different tears. These were tears of relief, of hope, of witnessing a community rally around her mother in a way she'd probably never imagined possible. Judge Caprio let the moment breathe. He understood intuitively that what was happening transcended his courtroom, transcended the simple traffic violation that had brought Maria Santos before him that morning. This was becoming something larger, something that would resonate far beyond these walls. Finally, he spoke again. Miss Santos, I want you to collect everyone's information before you leave today. Jimmy, he nodded to the bailiff, please make sure Miss Santos has contact information for everyone who's offered assistance. Jimmy Martinez nodded, already pulling out a notepad. Judge Caprio continued. I also want to say something to everyone watching, both here in this courtroom and to anyone who might see this video later. Share this if you think Judge Caprio's next words contain wisdom every person in power should hear, because he was about to articulate something profound about justice, mercy, and the role of institutions in people's lives. Justice isn't just about following the letter of the law, Judge Caprio said, his voice steady now, carrying the weight of his decades on the bench. Justice is about recognizing that laws exist to serve humanity, not the other way around. When we lose sight of the human beings behind the violations, when we treat people as nothing more than case numbers or revenue sources, we betray the very purpose of having a justice system at all. He paused, letting those words settle. Maria Santos broke a traffic law, that's a fact. But Maria Santos is also a human being fighting every single day to provide for her children, to model dignity and perseverance, to teach her kids that even when life is overwhelmingly difficult, you keep showing up, you keep trying. Sofia's drawing showed me something that no traffic camera could capture. It showed me context, humanity, and love. Drop a comment telling me if you think more judges should consider context and circumstances, not just violations, because this question gets to the heart of what kind of society we want to be. Judge Caprio wasn't finished with his impromptu speech. I've been blessed in my life. I grew up in a family that struggled, that knew what it meant to count every penny, to make hard choices about which bills to pay and which to delay. My father worked multiple jobs. My mother stretched every dollar until it screamed. I understand struggle because I've seen it up close. That understanding should make us more compassionate, not less. He looked directly at Maria. You're not a criminal. You're not a bad person. You made a mistake in the context of a life that's incredibly challenging. That doesn't excuse the mistake, but it certainly explains it. An explanation matters. Context matters. Humanity matters. The courtroom was absolutely silent now, except for the occasional sniffle, the sound of tissues being pulled from purses and pockets. The court reporter had tears streaming down her face as she transcribed the judge's words. The bailiff was standing straighter somehow, visibly proud to be part of this proceeding. Like this video, if you believe that these moments, these decisions to treat people with dignity, are what restore faith in institutions, because that's exactly what was happening in that Providence courtroom. Every person present was witnessing what the justice system could be when guided by wisdom and compassion rather than mere adherence to rules. Judge Caprio looked at Sofia one more time. Young lady, you did something remarkable today. You took a situation that was scary and overwhelming, and you used your creativity to communicate something important. You advocated for your mother. You showed me and everyone here who she really is beyond the traffic violation. That took courage. That took empathy. Those are qualities that will serve you well throughout your life. Sofia wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and managed a small smile. Thank you, she said quietly. I just wanted you to know that my mom is a good person. Judge Caprio nodded. Mission accomplished, sweetheart. Mission definitely accomplished. He looked down at his docket, at the other cases waiting to be heard, then made another unusual decision. We're going to take a 15-minute recess, he announced. Everyone needs a moment to compose themselves, myself included. When we return, we'll continue with the remaining cases. He banged the gavel once, a gentle tap that served as punctuation to an extraordinary proceeding. But before he could stand to leave the bench, he had one more thing to say. Share this with someone who needs to hear what he said next, because these words would become some of the most quoted from his entire career. To everyone in this courtroom, to everyone who might watch this video, I want you to remember something, Judge Caprio said, his hand resting on Sofia's drawing. We all have the power to make someone's day better or worse. We all face moments where we can choose compassion or indifference, understanding or judgment. What happened here today happened because an 11-year-old girl chose to act, chose to use her voice, chose to advocate for someone she loves. That choice created a cascade of kindness that will impact this family in ways we can't even fully measure yet. He paused, emotion thick in his voice again. Be like Sofia. When you see injustice, when you see someone struggling, when you see an opportunity to help or to show compassion, don't wait for someone else to do it. Speak up, act. Use whatever gifts you have, whether that's art or resources or expertise or just a kind word. The world needs more people who see past the surface to the humanity beneath. Quote, drop a comment if you commit to being more like Sofia, to advocating for those who need a voice, because that's the challenge Judge Caprio was laying down. This wasn't just about one family or one courtroom moment. This was about a fundamental approach to how we treat each other, especially those who are struggling. The courtroom emptied slowly during the recess. People surrounded Maria and Sofia, offering encouragement, exchanging contact information, taking photos that would quickly spread across social media. David Morrison, the auto shop owner, waited patiently to give Maria his business card and directions to his shop. Rebecca Thornton, the attorney, was already pulling up information on her phone about assistance programs. Margaret Chen from the community center was telling Sofia about the art classes she could take, like this video. If you believe that sometimes the most important things happen in the spaces between official proceedings, because the recess was becoming its own kind of community organizing session. A local news reporter who'd been in the gallery covering routine court proceedings for the Providence Journal was on the phone with her editor. You're not going to believe what just happened, she was saying. This is going to be huge. We need to run this on the front page. She was right. By that evening, the story would be trending on local news. By the next morning, it would be picked up by regional outlets. Within 3 days, CNN, The Today Show, and Good Morning America would all feature segments on the 11-year-old's drawing that stopped Judge Caprio's courtroom. But the real story, the one that would unfold over the coming weeks and months, was about how that single moment would transform multiple lives in ways both expected and completely surprising. Maria Santos, still stunned by everything that had happened, sat in the hallway during the recess with Sofia beside her. Mia, she said softly, using the Spanish term of endearment, why didn't you tell me you were making that drawing? Sofia shrugged, a child again despite the wisdom she'd demonstrated. I wanted it to be a surprise. I wanted to help, but I didn't know how. Then I remembered you always tell us that when we don't know what to say, we should draw or write about how we feel. So that's what I did. Share this if you believe that the lessons we teach our children come back to us in unexpected ways. Because Maria was seeing her own parenting reflected back at her through Sofia's actions. She'd taught her daughter to express emotions creatively, to advocate for what's right, to see the humanity in others. Sofia had taken those lessons and applied them in a moment that mattered. I'm so proud of you, Maria whispered, pulling Sofia close. You were so brave in there. Sofia nestled against her mother. I wasn't scared. I knew if the judge saw who you really are, he would understand. That simple faith, that belief that truth and humanity would prevail if just given the chance to be seen, was perhaps the most remarkable thing about Sofia's action. An 11-year-old child had understood something that adults often forget. That stories matter, that context matters, that seeing people fully is the first step toward treating them justly. When court reconvened 15 minutes later, Judge Caprio proceeded through the remaining cases with his typical blend of fairness and compassion. But something had shifted in that courtroom. The other defendants, who'd witnessed what had happened with Sofia Santos, seemed to carry themselves differently. They were more honest about their circumstances, less defensive, more willing to take responsibility while also explaining their contexts. And Judge Caprio, perhaps inspired by the morning's events, seemed to find even more opportunities to show mercy without abandoning justice. Drop a comment telling me about a time you witnessed or experienced compassionate justice. Because these stories matter, they remind us what's possible when systems work correctly. But the story of Sofia Santos and Sofia's drawing didn't end when they left the courtroom that day. In fact, in many ways, that's when the real story began. Within hours of the video being posted to the Caught in Providence YouTube channel, it began going viral. The thumbnail showing Judge Caprio holding up Sofia's crayon drawing, tears visible on his face, was impossible to scroll past. The title, 11-year-old daughter draws picture for Judge Caprio, didn't do justice to the emotional punch of the actual video, but it was enough to draw viewers in. By the end of the first day, the video had garnered 500,000 views. By the end of the first week, it had reached 15 million. Comments poured in from around the world. "I'm a tough guy, a construction worker who doesn't cry at movies. I sobbed watching this." That comment, from a user named Tough Guy Tears, received over 50,000 likes. This is what happens when judges remember they're dealing with human beings, not just cases. Another highly liked comment from Justice Matters 2020. "That little girl is wise beyond her years. Her parents are raising her right, despite their struggles." From Proud Teacher 88 with 30,000 likes. "I wish every judge in America would watch this and learn from Judge Caprio." From Frustrated Defendant, clearly someone with a negative court experience. Like this video if you believe Judge Caprio represents what all judges should aspire to be. Because the comments section became a space for people to process their own experiences with the justice system, their own struggles with poverty, their own amazement at Sofia's wisdom and courage. But the viral spread of the video had consequences beyond just views and comments. Share this if you think social media, despite its problems, can sometimes facilitate real-world positive change, because that's exactly what began to happen. A GoFundMe campaign, started not by Maria but by a viewer in California who'd been moved by the story, raised over $125,000 in less than 2 weeks. The campaign creator, a teacher named Linda Martinez who'd never met the Santos family, wrote, "This family deserves a chance to breathe, to not worry constantly, to have a safety net. Let's give them that." Maria was initially hesitant to accept the money. "It's too much," she told Rebecca Thornton, the attorney who'd volunteered to help and had become something of an advisor to Maria in the whirlwind following the viral video. "People need to keep their money for their own families." But Rebecca, with the wisdom of someone who'd worked with struggling families for decades, had a different perspective. "Maria," she said gently, "people are giving because it makes them feel good. They watched what happened in that courtroom and felt helpless to do anything. This gives them a way to participate in your story, to be part of the solution. By accepting their help, you're actually giving them a gift, the gift of knowing their contribution made a real difference." Drop a comment if you've ever given to a cause that moved you and felt that sense of purposeful action, because that's what thousands of people were experiencing through their contributions to Maria's family. After extensive discussions and with Rebecca's legal guidance, Maria accepted the GoFundMe proceeds. The money was placed in a trust with specific allocations. A portion for immediate needs like overdue bills and repairs to their apartment, a significant portion for the children's education funds, and an emergency reserve for unexpected expenses. The first thing Maria did with the money was pay 3 months of rent in advance. For the first time in years, she went to sleep, not worrying about eviction. The second thing she did was take all 3 of her children to a real sit-down restaurant, not fast food, where they ordered whatever they wanted from the menu without checking prices first. Mateo, who'd had the fever the morning of the traffic violation, ordered chicken tenders and a chocolate milkshake with an elaborate sundae for dessert. Sofia ordered pasta and couldn't stop smiling when it arrived in a portion big enough for 2 people. Diego, the middle child who'd been quiet through most of the upheaval, whispered to his mother, "Does this mean we're not poor anymore?" Maria had to fight back tears as she explained that they were going to be okay, that people had been kind and generous, but that they still needed to be careful and grateful. Like this video if you know that financial security, even temporary, changes everything about how a family functions, because the transformation in the Santos household over the following weeks was profound. But the story continued to evolve in unexpected ways. Judge Caprio, who'd purchased Sofia's drawing for $500, did exactly what he'd promised. He had it professionally framed, a beautiful dark wood frame with museum-quality glass, and hung it in his chambers where he could see it every day. Lawyers, other judges, court staff, and visitors would see the drawing and ask about it, and Judge Caprio would tell Sofia's story. Share this if you believe that art has the power to communicate truth in ways that statistics and arguments cannot, because that drawing became a teaching tool, a conversation starter, a reminder to everyone who saw it about the real human consequences of judicial decisions. Judge Caprio began using Sofia's drawing as a reference point in speaking engagements. He'd been invited to speak at law schools, judicial conferences, and community events for years. But after the viral video, those invitations tripled. And in every speech, he would tell the story of the 11-year-old girl who used crayons to show him the context behind a traffic violation. "This drawing," he would say, holding up a printed copy since the original remained safely in his chambers, "represents everything I believe about justice. It shows that people are more than their worst moments, more than their mistakes. It shows that creativity and courage can come from the most unexpected places. And it reminds me that I have a responsibility not just to enforce laws, but to see and respond to the humanity of every person who enters my courtroom." Drop a comment if you think Judge Caprio's approach should be taught in every law school in America, because there was a growing movement among legal reformers to use his methods as a case study in compassionate justice. Several law schools, including Harvard, Yale, and Stanford, invited Judge Caprio to lecture. Boston University's law school created a semester-long seminar called Justice and Mercy, the Caprio Approach, which used videos from his courtroom, including Sofia's case, as teaching materials. Students analyzed not just the legal aspects of the cases, but the psychological, sociological, and moral dimensions of how Judge Caprio conducted his courtroom. Meanwhile, Sofia's life had changed too, though in ways that were age-appropriate and largely positive. Her school, Vartan Gregorian Elementary, invited her to present her story at an assembly. Standing in front of 300 students and teachers, Sofia talked about why she'd made the drawing. "I wanted the judge to know my mom," she said simply. "Sometimes people only see what someone did wrong, but they don't see all the good things about them. My mom works really hard. She takes care of us even when she's tired. She deserves for people to know that." The assembly erupted in applause. Sofia's teacher, Mrs. Amanda Rodriguez, was crying openly. The principal, who'd been at the school for 20 years, later said it was one of the most impactful assemblies they'd ever held. Like this video if you believe children have profound things to teach adults about fairness and compassion. Because Sofia was demonstrating wisdom that many adults struggle to achieve. But perhaps the most significant ongoing impact was the change in Maria's circumstances. With the immediate financial pressure relieved, she was able to make different choices. She kept her part-time job at the elementary school because she loved being around the children and wanted to be present at her kids' school. But she was able to quit the brutal 3:30 a.m. shift cleaning offices and instead enrolled in a certified nursing assistant program at the community college. The program was 16 weeks long, and upon completion, she would be qualified for a job that paid almost double what she'd been making working multiple part-time positions. Rebecca Thornton, the attorney who'd volunteered to help, worked with Maria to access several assistance programs she'd been eligible for but hadn't known about. They secured SNAP benefits that added $480 per month for groceries. They got the children enrolled in the free lunch program at school. They accessed a utility assistance program that reduced the family's electric and gas bills by 40%. Share this if you think navigating the social services system shouldn't require a law degree, because that's a reality many struggling families face, there are resources available, but accessing them requires knowledge and persistence that people in crisis often don't have. Maria's car, the 2004 Honda Civic that had been held together by prayer and duct tape, received extensive repairs at Morrison's Auto Repair, all covered by David Morrison's commitment to provide free maintenance for a year. "The car is safe now," David told Maria when she picked it up after a full service. "New brakes, new tires, oil change, and I fixed that transmission issue you didn't even know you had. You're good for at least another 50,000 miles. He refused to even discuss payment, waving off Maria's attempts to give him something. "Just promise me that when you're in a position to help someone else, you'll do it," he said. "That's the only payment I want, for you to pass it forward. Drop a comment if you believe in the pay-it-forward philosophy, because that's how communities build resilience and care for their most vulnerable members." The ripple effects continue to spread in ways both large and small. The Providence City Council, inspired by the viral attention to Sofia's case, voted to create a traffic citation hardship review program. Under the new program, defendants could apply for fine reductions or payment plans based on their financial circumstances, and the burden of proof was placed on the city to verify ability to pay, rather than on defendants to prove inability to pay. The program was nicknamed Sofia's Law by local media, though officially it was called the Financial Hardship Review Initiative. Judge Caprio testified at the city council meeting where the program was approved. "What happened in my courtroom with Maria Santos and her daughter Sofia should not have required a viral video to achieve a just outcome," he said. "Every person who comes before the court struggling financially should have access to consideration and accommodation. This program will help make that a reality. Like this video if you think systems should be designed with compassion built in, not requiring exceptional judges to work around harsh rules, because that was the systemic change starting to emerge from Sofia's single act of courage." 6 months after the courtroom hearing, the Caught in Providence show invited Maria and Sofia back for a follow-up segment. This was unusual. The show typically didn't do follow-ups, but the overwhelming interest from viewers made it impossible to ignore. People wanted to know how the family was doing. When Maria and Sofia walked back into that courtroom, the reaction was immediate and emotional. The gallery, filled with people who'd watched the original video online, erupted in applause. Judge Caprio came down from the bench again, greeting Maria with a warm handshake and Sofia with another hug. "It's so good to see you both," he said, and the sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. "I've thought about you often. Tell me, how are things going? Share this if you believe following up on people's stories matters, because it shows that they're not just viral content. They're real human beings whose lives continue beyond the dramatic moment." Maria, looking healthier and less exhausted than she had 6 months earlier, smiled widely. "Your Honor, I don't even know where to begin. Everything has changed. I'm in school to become a CNA. My kids are thriving. We're not living in constant fear anymore. It's like we can finally breathe." Her voice caught with emotion. "What you did that day, what Sofia's drawing started, it gave us a chance we wouldn't have had otherwise." Judge Caprio nodded, visibly moved. "I'm glad to hear that. But I want to be clear about something. I didn't do much. I dismissed a ticket and bought a piece of art. You did the hard part. You took the opportunity created by that moment and ran with it. You enrolled in school. You're building a better future for yourself and your children. That's all you. Drop a comment if you think Judge Caprio's humility is as admirable as his compassion, because he consistently directed credit away from himself toward the people he helped." He turned to Sofia, who was now 12 and had grown noticeably taller, though she still had that same thoughtful expression in her eyes. "And what about you, young lady? How's school going?" Sofia grinned. "Really good. I joined the art club at school and we had an exhibition. I sold 2 paintings." Judge Caprio's face lit up. "You sold paintings? That's wonderful. Are you still drawing? Still using your art to communicate important things?" Sofia nodded enthusiastically. "Yes." We did a project at school about things we care about in our community. I drew a picture about how we need more parks and safe places for kids to play. My teacher said she was going to send it to the city council. Like this video if you think Sofia is going to grow up to be a powerful advocate for change, because all the signs pointed to exactly that trajectory. Judge Caprio looked at the courtroom cameras. Folks, this is why I love doing this show. It's not about the drama, it's not about catching people doing wrong things. It's about these moments, seeing people take the opportunities presented to them and build better lives. Maria and Sofia remind us that most people, if given a chance and some support, will do remarkable things with that chance. But the follow-up segment wasn't just about celebrating progress. Judge Caprio wanted to use the moment to draw attention to ongoing needs. Maria, he said, your story has a happy trajectory. But you're one family. There are thousands of families in Providence alone who are facing the same struggles you were facing. What would you want people to know about poverty, about struggling families, about the system? Share this if you believe that people who've experienced poverty are the real experts on what needs to change, because Maria's answer would be both personal and powerfully systemic in its implications. Maria took a breath, gathering her thoughts. I would want people to know that nobody wants to be poor. Nobody wakes up and thinks, I want to struggle to feed my kids today. Every poor person I know is working, sometimes multiple jobs, and still can't get ahead. The system is set up in ways that keep you trapped. If you can't afford car insurance and you get caught driving, you get a fine you can't afford, which makes you more poor, which makes it even harder to get the insurance. If you can't afford to take time off work to go to court, you miss your hearing, you get a warrant, and now you have a criminal record that makes it even harder to find better work. It's like quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. Drop a comment if you've experienced or witnessed the cycle of poverty that Maria describes so clearly, because her words resonated with millions of people who understood exactly what she meant. Judge Caprio was nodding. That's exactly why I try to consider context in my courtroom. The law should help people become better, not trap them in cycles of poverty and despair. He looked at Maria intently. What's your advice for other people in situations like you were in? What do you wish you'd known earlier? Maria smiled softly. I wish I'd known that asking for help isn't weakness. I was so proud, so determined to handle everything myself. But when I finally accepted help, from the community, from programs, from kind people, everything started to change. Also, I wish I'd known about all the resources that were available. I'd been eligible for assistance for years, but didn't know it existed or how to apply. We need better outreach, better education about what's available. Like this video if you think we should make accessing help easier, not harder for people who are struggling, because the complexity of the social services system is itself a barrier that keeps people from getting support they need and deserve. Sofia spoke up then, unprompted. I want to say something. Judge Caprio nodded permission. I think people should know that poor kids are still smart. We're still talented. We have dreams too. Sometimes people look at us like we're less than other kids just because we don't have nice clothes or the newest phones. But my mom always taught me that our worth isn't about what we have, it's about who we are and how we treat people. The courtroom went silent. This 12-year-old girl had just articulated something that social scientists and advocates struggle to communicate, that poverty doesn't diminish human value, talent, or potential. Share this if you believe that every child, regardless of their family's economic circumstances, deserves to be seen, valued, and given opportunities to thrive. Because Sofia was speaking a truth that too many people in power forget. Judge Caprio stood up, which signaled something important was about to happen. Sofia, you've inspired me since the day I met you. That drawing you made hangs in my chambers. I see it every single day. It reminds me why I do this work. But I want to do something else for you today. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. I've established a scholarship fund in your name. The Sofia Santos Scholarship for Young Advocates will provide financial support to students from low-income families who demonstrate a commitment to advocacy, creativity, and standing up for others. The fund starts with a $10,000 contribution from me and my family, and we're inviting others to contribute as well. Drop a comment if you think investing in children like Sofia is the best investment a society can make, because Judge Caprio was putting his money where his values were. The envelope he handed to Sofia contained information about the scholarship fund, but also something else. "That envelope also contains a letter," Judge Caprio said. "It's a letter I wrote to you, to read when you're older, maybe when you're graduating high school or starting college. It talks about this moment, about what your drawing meant to me, and about my hopes for your future. Don't read it now. Save it for when you're ready." Sofia held the envelope carefully, as if it contained something precious and fragile. "Thank you," she whispered, and then louder. "Thank you for seeing us. For seeing my mom. For caring." Like this video if you're crying right now. Because there wasn't a dry eye in that courtroom. The exchange between the judge who'd built a career on compassion and the young girl who'd moved him so profoundly was almost too much to bear. But Judge Caprio had one more surprise. "Maria," he said, turning his attention back to the mother, "I understand you're in the CNA program at CCRI. Maria nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm halfway through. I'll be certified by August." Judge Caprio smiled. "I've taken the liberty of speaking with the director of nursing at Rhode Island Hospital. When you complete your certification, if you're interested, there's a position waiting for you in their long-term care unit. It's full-time, with benefits, including health insurance for you and your children. Starting pay is $18.50 an hour, with raises based on performance. You'd also qualify for tuition reimbursement if you decide to continue your education toward an RN degree. Share this if you think Judge Caprio just keeps finding ways to be even more amazing, because he'd leveraged his connections and reputation to create an opportunity for Maria that would provide true economic stability." Maria's hands flew to her mouth. $18.50 an hour? She repeated, as if unable to process the number. For context, her multiple part-time jobs combined had been earning her roughly $11 per hour, with no benefits and no security. This job would essentially double her income while cutting her work hours, meaning more time with her children and more stability for the family. "With benefits?" she asked, still seemingly unable to believe it. Judge Caprio nodded. "With full benefits, health, dental, vision insurance for you and all 3 kids, paid time off, sick leave, retirement contribution matching, everything you need to build real security for your family." Maria broke down completely, sobbing with a relief so profound it was physical. Sofia wrapped her arms around her mother. People in the gallery were crying openly. This wasn't just a feel-good moment. This was life-changing, family trajectory-altering intervention. Drop a comment telling me what you would do if someone changed your life this dramatically, because Sofia Santos was experiencing something most people only dream about, a hand up at exactly the right moment, offered with dignity and compassion that would fundamentally alter her family's future. When Maria could speak again, she looked at Judge Caprio with an expression of such gratitude, it was almost painful to witness. "I will never forget this. I will never forget what you've done for us. And I promise you, when I'm stable, when I'm in a position to help others, I will. I'll pay this forward 100 times over." Judge Caprio nodded, his own eyes wet. "I know you will. That's the kind of person you are. That's what Sofia showed me in that drawing, that you're a fighter, a survivor, someone who protects and provides no matter what. Now you'll be able to do that from a position of stability instead of constant crisis." Quote, "Like this video if you believe that breaking cycles of poverty requires exactly this kind of intervention, seeing people's potential, providing concrete opportunities, and doing it with dignity that preserves self-respect." The follow-up segment ended with hugs, with promises to stay in touch, with Judge Caprio reminding Maria that his door was always open if she needed anything. But the impact of that follow-up video would rival the original. It would be viewed over 30 million times in the first month. News outlets from around the world would cover it. The Today Show flew Maria, Sofia, and Judge Caprio to New York for an interview. Ellen DeGeneres sent a video message praising Sofia's courage and Judge Caprio's compassion, along with a $25,000 contribution to the Sofia Santos Scholarship Fund. Share this if you think positive stories deserve as much attention as negative ones, because the hunger for this content showed that people were desperate for evidence that compassion and justice could coexist. But the most important developments happened away from cameras and media attention. Maria completed her CNA certification in August 2020, passing her exams with flying colors. She started her position at Rhode Island Hospital in September. For the first time in her adult life, she had health insurance. When Sofia developed strep throat in October, Maria took her to the doctor without agonizing about the cost. When Matteo broke his arm falling off his bike in November, they went to the emergency room, without fear of bankruptcy. These ordinary moments of accessing healthcare without crisis were extraordinary for a family that had spent years avoiding medical care because they couldn't afford it. Drop a comment if you think healthcare should be a right, not a privilege, because Maria's story illustrated the brutal calculus that millions of American families face when health emergencies arise. Diego, the middle child who'd been quiet through so much of the family drama, began excelling in school. His teachers noted that he seemed more focused, more confident, more willing to participate. When asked what had changed, Diego said simply, "My mom isn't scared anymore." When your mom isn't scared, you don't have to be scared either. That observation from a 9-year-old child captured the intergenerational impact of economic instability. Children absorb their parents' stress, carry their parents' fears, even when parents try to hide it. When Maria's circumstances stabilized, the entire family's emotional landscape shifted. Like this video, if you understand that poverty isn't just about money, it's about the constant stress and fear that erodes every aspect of life, because Diego's words illustrated that truth with heartbreaking clarity. Sofia continued to develop her artistic talents. The art teacher at her school, Ms. Jennifer Walsh, took special interest in nurturing Sofia's abilities. She helped Sofia apply to a summer art program at the Rhode Island School of Design for middle schoolers. The program cost $1, $200, which would have been impossibly out of reach a year earlier. But now, with the family's improved financial situation and with a partial scholarship Sofia received, she was able to attend. She spent 4 weeks that summer learning advanced drawing techniques, working with professional artists, and creating a portfolio of work that demonstrated remarkable talent for someone so young. Share this if you believe that talent exists everywhere, but opportunity doesn't, because Sofia represented countless children whose abilities never get the chance to develop because their families are too busy surviving to nurture potential. Judge Caprio kept his promise about Sofia's drawing. It remained prominently displayed in his chambers, and he told its story often. But more than that, Sofia's case changed how he approached every subsequent case. He'd always been compassionate, always looked for context and opportunities to help people rather than just punish them. But after Sofia, there was an even deeper intentionality to his questions, his considerations, his rulings. He would often think, when facing a difficult case, what isn't the traffic camera showing me? What would this person's child want me to know about them? Drop a comment if you think Sofia's drawing taught Judge Caprio something important even though he was already known for compassion. Because even the best of us can learn, grow, and deepen our empathy. 2 years after the original courtroom encounter, in October 2021, Providence held a community event honoring Judge Caprio's 40 years on the bench. The event was held at the Veterans Memorial Auditorium, and over 1,000 people attended. There were speeches from city officials, from attorneys who'd practiced before him, from defendants whose lives he'd changed. But the most moving moment came when Sofia Santos, now 13 years old and more confident in her voice, took the stage. Like this video if you want to know what she said, because her words would be quoted in newspapers, shared across social media, and taught in law school classes as an example of justice, seen through the eyes of someone who'd experienced both the system's usual harshness and its potential for compassion. 2 years ago, Sofia began, her voice clear and steady, despite speaking to over 1,000 people, I was an 11-year-old girl who was scared. Scared that my mom was going to have to pay money we didn't have. Scared that one more bill would be the one that broke us. Scared that my mom, who worked harder than anyone I knew, was going to be treated like she was just a criminal who didn't care about rules. Share this if you've ever been afraid of a system that seemed designed to crush rather than help, because Sofia was articulating an experience common to millions. I didn't know what to do. I'm just a kid. I can't pay bills. I can't fix my mom's car. I can't make food appear in the refrigerator or make the rent money materialize. But I could draw, so I drew what I knew, that my mom was a hero, that she was fighting every day to take care of us, and that she deserved to be seen as a whole person, not just someone who made a mistake. Drop a comment if you think Sofia has a future in public speaking or advocacy, because she commanded that room with the kind of presence that some people spend their whole lives trying to develop. Judge Caprio saw my drawing, he saw my mom, he saw us, and he did something that changed our lives. But here's what I want everyone to know. He didn't just help my family. He showed us and everyone who watched that video what justice should look like. Justice should see people. Justice should understand context. Justice should help people become better, not just punish them for being human and making mistakes. The auditorium was silent except for Sofia's voice. My mom is now a CNA at Rhode Island Hospital. She helps people every single day. She has health insurance for us. We're not scared all the time anymore. I'm in advanced art classes. My brothers are thriving, all because one judge took the time to see us as people. Like this video if you think 13-year-old Sofia just explained judicial philosophy better than most law professors could, because that's exactly what she did. She continued. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night sometimes. We got lucky. We got Judge Caprio. We got a viral video. We got help. But what about all the families who don't? What about all the moms like mine who work just as hard, who are just as good, but who don't get a chance to have their story told? Who don't get a judge who looks beyond the violation to see the person? They're still out there. They're still struggling. They still deserve dignity and compassion and opportunities. Share this if you think Sofia just challenged all of us to extend the compassion she received to everyone who needs it, because that was exactly her point. She wasn't just grateful for being helped, she was advocating for systematic change. So yes, we're here to honor Judge Caprio, and we should. He's amazing. He changed my family's life. But I think the way we really honor him is by doing what he does. Seeing people, understanding their circumstances, offering help when we can, and building systems that treat everyone with dignity. Sofia paused, looking directly at Judge Caprio, who was sitting in the front row with tears streaming down his face. Thank you for seeing us, Judge Caprio. Thank you for buying my drawing. Thank you for everything you've done. But mostly, thank you for showing all of us what's possible when justice and mercy work together. The standing ovation lasted over 5 minutes. People were crying, applauding, whistling. Judge Caprio stood and opened his arms, and Sofia walked off the stage directly into a hug that symbolized everything their unlikely connection had come to represent. Drop a comment if Sofia's speech moved you as much as it moved everyone in that auditorium, because this 13-year-old had just delivered one of the most powerful statements on justice, compassion, and systemic change that anyone would hear that year. In the months and years that followed, the ripples continued to spread. The Sofia Santos Scholarship Fund grew to over $200,000 through donations from around the world. It would eventually support 15 students per year in pursuing education while engaging in community advocacy. Maria completed additional training and became a charge nurse, supervising a team and earning a salary that allowed her family to move from their small apartment to a 3-bedroom house with a yard. Sofia's artwork was featured in a citywide exhibition on youth perspectives on justice. Diego made honor roll. Mateo joined his school's soccer team. Ordinary milestones that represented extraordinary progress for a family that had been drowning just a few years earlier. Like this video if you believe that this is what success looks like. Not dramatic Hollywood endings, but stable families, children thriving, parents able to parent without constant crisis, because that's the real measure of whether help actually helped. Judge Caprio eventually retired from the bench at age 82 after 43 years of service. His retirement was covered by national news outlets, and the consistent theme was how he'd transformed what municipal court could be. He'd shown that even in the handling of minor violations, there were opportunities to change lives, to see people fully, to administer justice with wisdom and compassion. In his retirement speech, he held up a photograph of Sofia's drawing. "This," he said, "represents everything I tried to do in my career." An 11-year-old child reminded me, that behind every case is a human being with a story, with struggles, with dignity that deserves to be honored. I hope I lived up to what this drawing called me to be. Share this entire video with someone who needs to see proof that the system can work, that compassion matters, that one person, whether a judge or an 11-year-old artist, really can make a difference. Because that's what this story proves. Sofia Santos is now in high school, still making art, still advocating for justice and equity, still being the voice for people who need one. Maria Santos is still working at Rhode Island Hospital, now mentoring other CNAs and teaching them not just medical skills, but compassion for patients who might be going through their own invisible struggles. And Judge Frank Caprio, even in retirement, continues to speak about justice and mercy, continues to share Sofia's story, continues to remind anyone who will listen that the law exists to serve humanity, not the other way around. The drawing that stopped a courtroom now hangs in the Providence City Hall, on permanent loan from Judge Caprio's personal collection. Beside it is a plaque that reads, Sofia Santos, age 11, a reminder that justice must always see the humanity of those it serves. October 2019. Thousands of people have stood before that drawing, many taking photos, many crying, all of them moved by the story of how a child's crayons and courage changed a family's trajectory and reminded a city what compassion looks like in action. Drop a final comment telling me what you'll do differently after watching this story, how you'll choose to see people more fully, to offer help with dignity, to remember that everyone you encounter is carrying struggles you can't see. Because that's Sofia's ultimate challenge to all of us, not just to be moved by her story, but to let it change how we move through the world. If this story impacted you, if it reminded you that there's still good in the world, if it inspired you to be more like Judge Caprio or Sofia or Maria, then hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We share stories like this regularly, stories that remind us of our shared humanity, that show us what's possible when we lead with compassion, that prove that ordinary people doing extraordinary things are all around us if we just pay attention. Share this video far and wide. Comment below with your thoughts, your own stories of compassion you've witnessed or experienced, your commitments to seeing people more fully. And remember, whether you're a judge or an 11-year-old with crayons, you have the power to change someone's day, someone's trajectory, someone's life. Use that power wisely. Use it with compassion. Use it to build the world Sofia's drawing called us toward, one where justice and mercy walk hand in hand, where seeing people fully is the first step toward treating them justly, where no one has to go viral to be treated with dignity. That's the world worth fighting for. That's the lesson of an 11-year-old's drawing that stopped a courtroom and started a movement.